Oh, okay, great. Hello, Internet. My name's Javion Smith. You may have heard of me from my famous appearances and Gen Con's Twitch channel when I appeared on Table Takes with Emma, actually.
All right.
Um,
I
I
believe we are
am just
live.
a board Oh, gamer, okay, great.
Great.
board game lover, and
Hey.
sometimes I try my best to help my friends, and that's what I'm doing today. I'm here with the visionary, the genius behind Abandon All Artichokes, Emma Larkins. Say hi, Emma.
Hello, Javion. Thanks so much for joining me today.
No problem. Thanks for asking me to be here. I'm super excited because I love you and I love your game.
I love you too.
So, one thing I want to say before we get too into the whole AMA is that exciting announcement. Apparently, somebody's amazing, perfect board game won an award today. It was the Geek Dad Game of the Year award.
Oh gosh, yeah. I It's a little overwhelming because I wasn't expecting it, obviously, and we had been planning this stream for a little while now. So as the stream happened, and Jonathan Liu sent me a message today being like, "Hey, you should check out Geek Dad," and I checked it out, and it had won the Game of the Year award. They had announced probably a month or so ago their finalists, so it was on there, and it ended up winning the award. So it's my first Game of the Year, so super fun and exciting and a little overwhelming. Uh, I'm almost not sure what to say about that. I just like I don't know what to do. I never won an award like this for a board game before, so it's just like
That's so cool. I'm so excited and happy for you.
Thank you.
Um, we can just say that this stream is sort of now a victory lap for you,
Yes.
sort of celebration for your successes. Okay, so will you please tell us
Hmm.
just what the heck Abandon All Artichokes is?
Absolutely. Abandon All Artichokes is a heartless card game. It's of the deck building genre. Specifically, people have been calling it a deck wrecker. You start with a hand of 5 artichokes and 5 artichokes in your deck. So you have all artichokes, that's all you got. You have a garden row with a selection of non artichoke cards that will help you get artichokes out of your hand and out of your deck, because the goal of the game is to not necessarily get rid of all of your artichokes, but get rid of enough that you can draw a hand free of artichokes. And if you draw a hand with no artichokes at the end of your turn, you immediately win the game.
That's awesome. Now, for the less educated like myself,
Hmm.
why is it called a heartless game? Is it because you're heartlessly removing a beloved vegetable from existence?
I guess so. I didn't know when I went into this just how strongly people feel about artichokes. It's one of the most frequently asked questions I get is, what do you have against artichokes? I don't have anything against artichokes, but I guess getting rid of them is kind of heartless, specifically because you throw them into the compost, these perfectly good artichokes. So I guess that's kind of mean. But more importantly, it's a play on words, or a pun, if you will, because artichokes have a
Hmm.
heart, right?
Oh,
Like the heart of the
I
artichoke.
actually didn't know that.
Yeah, so getting rid of the artichokes, it's heart. It's a pun. Yeah, which is
Okay,
great. I didn't even
I will
come up
remember
with
that from now.
this with the pun. That was Game Right that came up with it. So I was very excited. What's one of my favorite things about the finished product of the game is the back of the box and the rules. Very much just lean into the humor of vegetable puns, and that makes me very happy.
When you were designing Abandon All Artichokes, did you have in mind that you wanted it to be a kid-friendly, all ages kind of game? Or were you going for something else at the start and maybe it changed after?
Yeah, I would say of the games I play, and Javion, we play a lot of games together, so I'm sure that you will support me in this. I definitely gravitate towards a little bit of the easier to pick up games if they have a complex strategy to them. I still really enjoy that. Like, I play a lot of Magic, but I just love, I mean, you can have 10 small box games in your board game bag, back when we were meeting up together, and just play 3 or 4 of those in an afternoon, as opposed to getting into one game. Maybe you enjoy it, maybe you don't. Just seems like the fun per effort for smaller games is a little higher. Also, I originally designed this as part of my first board game a day challenge where every day of the week I made a new game. At least I prototyped it.
Mhm.
Did a quick play test with Phil the first week that I did that. So they all had to be games that were very quick to put together because I only had a day and usually about like an hour or two to put it together. So all those things came together to make it a little more family kid friendly. Also, some of my very early playtests, which were at the first PAX Unplugged, I think because the original cards I did have very similar faces on vegetables, so it attracted a younger audience, and I got some kids to playtest it, and they got it, and they had a lot of fun with it. So that was just, I don't know, when a kid likes your game, kids are super honest, right? They're not going to be nice. So they're like, that was fun. And it just feels all the more special to when a kid says nice things about your game. So I guess it did definitely push in that direction.
That's awesome. When we started working together at Mock's boarding house, we immediately hit it off and started playing board games and stuff together.
Mm.
But even when you tragically left, it was very clear to everyone who worked there that you had left your mark because I remember specifically whenever we would have to retire board games from the demo library, we would make sure to contact you for
Mm.
to give you all of the bits and pieces so that you could make more games because you were super excited about that, as I recall.
Oh yeah, yeah. The it's just board game bits, you know, all the pieces, the cubes, the little houses. I'm not gonna open my closet now because it's all the way back there and that would be kind of awkward. But in this closet right behind me, I finally set up all the little containers with all the little drawers. I have currencies in there. I have the cubes. It's just, as a board game designer, it can be very helpful to have physical components that you can move, play around with, and it's a great inspiration. For example, taking apart a game that has a timer, right? You can play around with that and see what kind of ideas come to you. I also just like the idea of recycling them because I will say the board games in the library at Mox were very well loved. It got to a certain point where it's hard to give a board game a second life past a certain point, right? You know, the games at
Mm.
Mox, it's like the cards honestly get kind of gross once they've been played 500
Yeah.
times, right?
Yeah.
The rules start to fall apart. You can only tape them together so many times. So I really appreciate this idea that, you know, they can live a little further beyond their otherwise expected life expectancy.
So tell us a little bit more about the origin story for Abandon All Artichokes.
All right. So first of all, y'all may have heard this part of the story before, but this was a name first game design. So a lot of designers start in different ways, right? We've worked on some game design before, Javion. So you'll know like you start with an idea or a theme or a mechanic, but this was back when I was doing game design daily and just trying to have a lot of fun and interesting ideas. So I made an alliterative game name list on the bus one day going to work at Mox. I just started writing out bodacious beavers or like canning crops of cauliflowers or whatever. You know, just made this long list of alliterative game names, which were all ridiculous, right? If you just very quickly try to spit out a litter of things, they're almost always funny. So I posted this list to Twitter of my alliterative game names, and surprisingly, multiple people said that they wanted to play or buy Abandon All Artichokes. So I was like, okay, I put a pin in that. You know, there's something there that's a hook for people.
Wow.
Yeah, and then months later, when I did, as I mentioned, my game a day week of rapid iteration of board game designs, I remembered that I had that name on hold. Tried to find a mechanic that would work with it. The deck building seemed to go well with the name Abandon All Artichokes, and I was trying to come up with something fairly quick, so I felt I had all the pieces to pull together, and yeah, that's where it sprouted
Wow.
from. Like, boom.
So you came up with the name first and then you just built the game out of it.
Yeah.
That's really cool. I remember actually playtesting this game with you when
Hmm.
I was working at Mox, and how excited I was to play a deck building game that was so simple.
Yeah.
And I think the artwork really complements the idea of the game. It's a game right thing. So in game right games, I think typically lean towards the younger audience a little bit more.
Yeah.
And I think it's cool that you found something that appeals to such a wide audience.
Yeah. The I have to give so much credit to the artist Bonnie Pang for creating just the perfect mix of cute and kind of snarky, because with cute things, and I love cute things, so it's a little tough for me, but I know there's definitely a tipping point where it goes from cute to cutesy, and
Mm,
then that can be a turn off for people. So it's like sickly sweet, right? It's too much.
yeah.
So some of the things I love about this is, like, as you can see in the picture of the face, it is adorable, but it's like, I don't know. It's just the right balance. It's cute, but it doesn't feel like something you'd necessarily find in a
Right.
nursery room, right?
Hmm.
It's got a little bit of an edge to it. And also, if you look at all the different expressions, like the potato expression, which is one of my favorite, not all of them are like happy and smiling. Some of them are just mad, like the onion, it's just like pissed off. So that range of expressions.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
thought that was pretty cool too. Were you, did you have any struggles or hardships or obstacles when you were designing the game that you had to overcome?
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the most exciting times for me for first designing a game is coming up with that first idea, and we've been through this together. You're excited, you're spitting out mechanics, your brain is working overtime, and you can see the through line to the perfect game, right? It's kind of, if you think about game design as a journey, you see the road. Your brain is like making the road as you look forward, and there's the pearly gates of the perfect game at the end of that road. And in that brief instant, everything comes together. You're like, oh, I know exactly how everything is going to work. And then instantly, as you share the game with someone or you play test it with someone, it all falls apart, right? The road collapses and the pearly gates disappear, and it's just murky, and there's pits and volcanoes, and there's this kind of whole journey you have to take to get a game from that platonic ideal of the thing you wanted to create to the finished product of what it's actually going to be. And what that looks like from a game design perspective is, you so many times during the development, especially because it's such a simple game, I would say to my playtest group, this is it. Even after 3 months of development, I'm like, we're done. This is the last version. Like, I've solved all the problems for it. And every single time I said that, it would be farther away. Like, I definitely made versions of the
Oh,
game that
okay.
were worse than the ones that came before.
Mm.
Uh, so yeah, it can definitely be tough to have those moments of thinking you figured everything out and putting it in front of another human and they immediately find the holes in it. It can be a little heartbreaking to go
What was
through
it?
that.
What was it like working with GameRight and getting a game published?
GameRight, I've been incredibly lucky to work with them, and I've had a few different publishing experiences. Honestly, they've all been pretty great. I've
Hmm.
definitely heard stories from other designers about having difficulties, but GameRight is just. I love a lot of things about them. I already loved a lot of their games before I started working with them. They really care a lot about making evergreen titles, so they want to put in the work to, first off, like, they get tons of pitches, right? So they want to make sure that whatever game it is, it fits with what they're doing, with their philosophy. And then once they decide they like a game, they want to put a lot of work in to make sure that it's the best game that it's going to be. But at the same time, they trust the designers a lot. So they weren't steamrolling me and saying, oh, it's got to be like
Okay.
this. There was a ton of back and forth between me and GameRight where I would, years actually of development, where I would have a version of the game, I would show it to them, they would test it with their people, come back to me with some thoughts, I would change things. So there was a lot of back and forth there. They were very open to suggestions, and I had a lot of hands-on time as well. So things that designers don't always get, like I got to look at the rule book before it was published, which was good because there was definitely some things that you miss things in translation, right? So like, this doesn't actually work this way, even if you read the rule book a million times, right? So I was really happy to be able to see the rules as they were written first of all, because I've heard designers say they get the published copy of their game and the publisher has changed a rule and now you're like, that's not even how I put it, right? Like now the game is different than the game that I designed. So that can always be a little bit weird. So
I hear you.
So yeah, it's been a great journey working with Gamewright, and they continue to be supportive. And just working with a big publisher like that, the game's going all sorts of different places. They just announced a version that's coming to Germany next year, so it's just really cool to be able to get my game all over the world.
That's awesome. After releasing the game, do you have any like fun stories about people who have played the game and really liked it or maybe didn't like it?
Oh my gosh, wow. I was actually talking with some people about this today, so I've got stories from around the spectrum. It's definitely been different than I was expecting it to be. Obviously, 2020 has been a year, so I definitely had visions in my head about what it was going to look like, right? I would be going to conventions, I would see people play it, I would be able to play it with a lot of people, and I would get to experience firsthand their experience with the game. I'd be able to play with a lot of my designer friends. A lot of that hasn't been able to happen. So I've been seeing a lot of this secondhand or third hand, right? Seeing it going on BGG and seeing the reviews, going on Amazon and seeing the reviews. All that being said, I have had some absolutely lovely stories. A lot of people, parents talking about their kids playing the game, people talking about their neighbors borrowing the game and never giving it back, and now they have to buy another copy. You're just like, oh, I'm so sorry about that, but also, yay, Seeing a lot of people really love it. People learning about deck building or using it to teach people deck building and getting people into this entirely new mechanic has been really fun to see. The one thing I will say that I wasn't entirely expecting from the release of the game was of Gamewright games, it's definitely a little bit more on the complex side, and there definitely have been people who've watched videos or just read the rules and have had trouble figuring out how to play, which it's been a little bit of a bummer for me. I know, any game will have that issue, right? Someone sees a game, They buy it, they think that they can figure it out or whatever, and they can't. That's no matter what game you design, you're always going to have that. But I think sometimes people pick it up and think it's going to be exactly as easy to pick up or to learn as Sushi Go, which, Sushi Go is an amazing game, and it is incredibly simple to teach, even non-gamers.
Right.
So there's been a little bit of mismatch potentially between expectation and what people end up getting. But I think that's growing pains. As it goes along, more people will know what it's like. And, maybe people will give it a second chance and figure out how to play it. And now they'll know more about games and mechanics. And I think that's really cool that this can potentially be something that opens people up more to different styles of game.
I think this could definitely be like a stepping stone into the world of board gaming. And I think it's really cool that so many people have had a chance to play it so far. If I could share my own story, I sat down to play it with my partner Patrick, and he kicked my butt every single time we played. And this was unique because I'm the board gamer.
Yeah.
And whenever we play games like this, I always win. So he found something that he excels at on the first try a little bit more than I did.
That's awesome. But Patrick is also very lucky. He's like Phil. Phil, my husband, has just very high luck, and Patrick also has that knack, right, for like getting the perfect rolls, getting the perfect cards. Abandon All Artichokes is not completely luck based, but there's enough luck in there that a newer player or a less experienced gamer or even a non-gamer can beat a gamer or a more experienced person, which is great. You know, you need that if you're going to have a family game or a game you can play with kids. That opportunity for them to, you know, not lose everything, like chess, right?
Mm-hmm. Right. We have actually one of our viewers asking a question, if you don't
Ooh,
mind.
yeah.
They would like to know more about the development of specific cards. Do you have any favorite cards? What was the process like building those cards? Do you have any fun stories or anything like that?
Oh my gosh, yeah. I always like to talk about the infinite potato problem. So, one of the things that's been really fascinating about developing this game, I'll say as a quick aside, I had mentioned before, I play a lot of Magic the Gathering, and there's definitely a cards deck thing if you play a lot of those styles of games where a lot of the abilities are kind of reminiscent of the things that happen in Abandon All Artichokes. So you can go to your discard pile, aka your graveyard or your grave hand, and interact with that, right? You have your hand of cards, you have your deck of cards, you have the cards outside of the game, and you're kind of playing around with all these different pieces. And one mechanic that most of these games have is drawing cards, right? Most deck builders, right? Dominion, right? That's a big part of it. It's like
Yeah.
you draw multiple cards and now you have
My
more stuff.
favorite part of deck building games is drawing cards and taking the longest turns I can possibly take.
Right. And that's really great, especially if you want a game that's more combo based, right? Well, now I get this, now I have some currency, and I can buy this, and you can do a lot of stuff on your turn, and that can make you feel more powerful. I love that in games. I wanted to have that in Abandon All Artichokes as well. Uh, but the unique element of Abandon All Artichokes, where cards don't cost anything, you get cards for free. They all have to be, they don't have points on them, so you can't use money or points to balance the individual cards. So they all have to have a very similar power level, which really makes it difficult to do any combo sort of stuff. So in the beginning, so was it Infinite Potato? Shoot, because potato has changed over time. I think potato was the draw card. Yeah, it was.
Mm.
It was a crazy powerful card. You could like draw two cards for like just the thing. Draw two cards. If one of them is an artichoke, you keep that card. Draw two cards or draw a card. If it's an artichoke, put it on the bottom of your deck. Just a million different iterations of draw a card, basically. One of my very first playtests was something where someone's like, "Oh, look, I got this thing, and I'm drawing cards, and now these are my discard. Now I reshuffle my discard. No, I got my draw a card. Look, it's infinite. I can just keep going over and over again." I said, "Like, fine, yes, okay, yes, that's broken. I don't want that to anything where it's infinite. You get into an infinite loop with a game, right? Is a problem." And I just I had to keep nerfing it and nerfing it, making it less and less powerful until eventually the current power of it is like draw take a look at a card. It doesn't even say draw. Look at a card at the top of your deck. If it's an artichoke, compost it. If not, discard it. So so you don't actually ever get more cards into your hand in that way. So you can't go through your deck faster, which kind of turns off the combo-ness of it. But had to do that to stop these weird edge case situations. But that card, I've shown pictures before on BGG or different places of all the iterations of all the cards. That one probably went through 20 or so different iterations. And then you compare that to a card like Broccoli, which is if you have 3 or more artichokes in hand, compost an artichoke. And I'm pretty sure that's what it was. I think it was even in the original iteration of the game. So that's kind of like, hey, I got all these artichokes. I'm going to get rid of one. It's great, really good in the beginning of the game, towards the middle of the game, still pretty effective, not as effective late game. It's just super slow, dependable, solid, getting rid of artichokes out of your hand. It's got a condition to it. And that's what a lot of the cards ended up being, right? Cards that conditionally get artichokes out of your hands in different ways.
Were there any cards that you had in maybe one of the prototypes that you had to get rid of for scrap?
Yeah. I went through a lot of different iterations of powers. Having seen like the full game in its final state, I'm thinking I might be able to come back to some of those. but the ones that were particularly problematic were the ones that took a lot of time. So Artichokes is supposed to be a pretty fast game, 15, 20 minutes, you can go through the whole thing. You'd think with the win condition of drawing a hand of all artichoke, or no, wait, artichokes, sorry, not all artichokes. Sometimes it would just happen after 5 minutes or whatever, but mathematically, I've never seen it happen. And if it did, that'd be like, aha, let's play another game. But sometimes it actually takes longer than you think it will take. And you go rounds, you're like, oh, come on, I have hardly any artichokes left. So I definitely didn't want to make it, it's very much at the cusp of the length of time I want the game to take. So I had to get cards that were like, get a card from each player, shuffle them all together, and then give them back to players randomly. Or like you pass your entire hand to the left or something, or you like just different things where it really stopped the game. So it's supposed to be fast paced, take a card, play a card. But there were definitely cards that took a lot of effort, or you get to like look at the top card of everyone's deck or choose one of them or something. Anything that where one person was just taking a lot of time on their turn eventually had to be cut just to make sure the game would continue to flow.
Do you have any regrets looking back? Is there anything about the game you would change now that the game is fully released?
Oh, that's a good question.
I'm sure you're very proud of the game as much as I am.
Yeah. I think, they're kind of a pie in the sky thing. I sometimes wonder if, because I've taken this concept of deck building to a very simple concept. A lot of people, when they say like, oh, this is a very simple deck builder, it still has a lot of text on the cards, a lot of different cards. I think I really got very close to the simplest deck builder. I sometimes wonder, especially seeing people struggle a little bit with the concepts, if there could have been a way to make it even more approachable, even more accessible. Where maybe I will someday crack that nut, figure out how to put that together. But yeah, not a regret so much as, just a what if.
Right.
What if I could have done something? Because I had, at one point, I tried to use very specific language. That's part of where composting your artichokes came from. But like the cards in your hand, that you would plant them into your garden. And I tried to use language a little bit to make it make more sense. But it eventually ended up making it more confusing for people. So, yeah. I think for any of my games, no matter what I design, I always gonna wonder a little bit, like could I have made it even easier? Could I have made it so someone just picks up the cards and they instantly implant a microchip in the cards or something, right? So you're just like, oh wow, aha, light bulb moment.
Well, as much as I believe that this is the perfect game, a viewer had a question, and that actually gave me an idea for a question. If you were to hypothetically build a Abandon All Artichokes again, so like 4 A's instead of 3,
Yeah.
what lessons would you take with you from the process of making a deck builder, or I guess a deck wrecker?
Yeah, I would say, oh my gosh, going through the process of it just definitely learned so much about deck builders in general, about the mechanic. Actually really hoping that more designers will play Abandon All Artichokes so we can kind of leave behind some of the things that we kind of held on to in the past. Because it's kind of like deck building as a mechanic is kind of like auctioning as a mechanic, where it really warps the structure of a game and it really becomes about deck building, which I love. But I think there's a lot of innovations that we can take to deck building, and a lot of stuff that I discovered just from watching inexperienced people play. So one of the big things was they would get a card from the market, aka garden, and they would just pick it up and like, oh, I can use this card now. And so many deck builders will make you put those cards into your discard pile, either because it's too powerful or I think just because that's how it originally was, right? With Dominion,
Mm.
you would put them into the discards. That's just what we do. And it just makes the game go on much longer. So I'd love to see more of just taking stuff into your hand and being able to use it more quickly. Um, I think a lot about power and balance of cards too. People can get caught up in having a lot of different types of cards, or oh, this is just a really cool concept and I just really want to have this card in there. But I think a lot of these types of games with a lot of different card types can become a little unbalanced, right? That was something I
Right.
really had to focus on Abandon All Artichokes, is just making sure no matter what time in the game, you would want most of the cards in the market, because I really love the version of deck builders where you have a fluctuating market. I think games like Dominion, where you have the different market piles, it's just especially if you're a min-maxer, I'm a little bit of a min-maxer. You start the
Yeah.
game and you're like, okay, what does that do? What does that do? What's going to be the first card I buy? What's going to be the second card I buy? You're already
Yeah.
planning based on these 10 piles, and all the information is, so it's like chess, right? Because all
Yeah.
the information is right there in front of you. So having a randomized or rotating element lets you play a little more tactically, a little more in the moment. But if you are doing that, it can be really hard to balance the cards, especially if it's a multiplayer game. Somebody gets the best card, and you're just like, well, I didn't get the best card in the game, so I'm not going to win. So just
Right.
kind of
Yeah.
paying a lot of attention to the power levels in the cards, and then just like what actions just feel fun. So have
Yeah.
things like player interaction in the game, right? So you're actually taking cards from people, but I managed to do it in such a way that you both compost your artichoke, or you have to give them something. So, and the game is so fast too, so that kind of interaction works. So it's like, what are those aha moments? Potato, again, my favorite card, because you look at the top card of your deck, like, oh, I bet it's going to be, you can do this whole dramatic thing, right? And sometimes you hit like 3 non-artichokes, like at 3 potatoes, like, oh, it's not an artichoke. Oh, it's not an artichoke. And that's just, it's really funny stories, right? It's like, oh, remember that time when I played like 10 potatoes and all my artichokes were at the bottom of my deck? So that kind of humor and drama, I
Yeah.
love seeing in a deck builder.
Another one of your viewers has a very interesting question.
Hmm.
Do you feel like AAA turned out like the game you started to make, or did it take on a life of its own?
It's a good question. It did keep the core mechanic, so that was the deck building. It did stay simple, so in a couple of ways, it remained a little bit what I started with, but so much of the development was determined by closely observing the game hitting the people, so the mechanics hitting the hands, and seeing those interaction points and changing things based on the ways that people were playing. So a lot of these innovations, it wasn't just like a big brain, like, oh, this is a really good way to make a deck builder. I would come up against a problem and have to figure it out. So with the market, for example, I don't remember the earliest version you played, Javion, but there was definitely a version where you had to pay for cards, and there was 2 markets. So you would
Oh.
pay artichokes by discarding them to get from the first market, and those were fruits. And then you'd have to discard a fruit to get to the vegetables. So there was kind of a tiered system to it. Because I didn't want to do money type currencies, right?
Right.
I wanted to keep it simple in that way and just use the cards as the currencies. But because of that, it slowed the game down, right? You had to discard your artichokes and you couldn't compost them, right? So it just ended up taking a lot longer than I wanted it to take. And for the secondary market, oh, I've got this really cool power, but I can't use it because I'm spending it, right, to get more stuff.
Yeah.
So it's just one of the core things I always say about game design is I want to do the stuff of the game, right? I just want to do the things of the game. You hear this all the time. So you're making me get rid of my thing, but I want to use my thing. So a lot of those little things, and then taking the cards into your hand. Um, and it actually got more complex too, because the original one had 4 or 5 different powers, and the final game now has 11 or 12 powers. I'm trying to remember. I think it's 10. I think the rhubarb promo on BGG is 11.
Mm.
So yeah, there was more powers, and it fluctuated too. It went from 4 to 5. At one point, I think I had 20 different cards in the deck, so I was going to a little bit more broad and a little more random with the things. So each game is different depending on the things that came up, but eventually settled on this set of cards between me and Game Right. So it's a little bit of both. You know, I had some visions of it, but I was very much willing to like let it be what it was going to be, which I think is such an important part of game design. Is
Yeah.
if it's pulling in a direction, it's not really worth fighting that. At least see where that ends up, and you might end up coming back. But you know, letting the game be what it's going to be, I feel, is a way to come up with much better games than trying to force it into your vision of what you think it should be.
I think another good lesson for deck builders out there, as you've demonstrated, is to try and remember these things or document them if you can, because your game might be as successful as Abandon All Artichokes someday.
Yeah.
So, um, I think Abandon All Artichokes has reached a pretty wide audience to have gotten the award that it's gotten from the illustrious Geek Dad. Uh, but what do you think is next for Abandon All Artichokes?
Yeah, it's been something. I don't want to say exactly that I've struggled with it, but I honestly, a lot of this year has been coming to terms with how I thought things were gonna go and how they actually turned out. It's like those cooking Pinterest memes, right?
Hmm.
It's like how it was supposed to look, how it ended up looking, right? So my intention was very much, as I mentioned, go to a lot of conventions, see people playing the game, play the game with people, make potentially come up with some expansion cards or some new versions based on the ways that people were playing. Haven't really haven't been able to do that, right? Because 2020. So I'm kind of coming up to the point of saying like, hey, this is what it is. You know, I'm just gonna play the game, kind of sit with it myself a little bit. I haven't seen it through a design lens in quite some time, so just sitting down, thinking about it. When I locked the design and the cards down with Game Right, I kind of felt like I had done all the cards. I'm like, because I worked so hard even to come up with those 11 powers. It's like, geez, how do I even come up with new cards for it? But I think seeing it from this distance, I'm going to be able to make some fun things for it. And there's, again, nothing official. You know, nothing is officially in the
Okay.
works expansion wise, or, you know, I'm not hiding any secrets here. But you know, there's a lot of Game Right games get new versions or expansions or stuff. So there's always that space for me to be able to pitch and talk about stuff. So yeah, I'm looking forward to playing around with the mechanics, seeing what I come up with. I don't know, pitching some merch or something. Like, I think there's a lot
Mm.
of fun stuff
Oh
that
yeah.
could potentially happen there.
I was actually watching an episode of Shut Up and Sit Down recently, and what did I see? Slapped on the back of the host's laptop, but an Abandon All Artichokes sticker, which I thought was super cool.
Yeah.
Also, um, I think I would be personally super excited to hear about an Abandon All Artichokes expansion, so I've got my fingers crossed for that.
Yeah, and that's definitely been something on Board Game Geek and other places. People have said that they are interested in having more powers and having more cards. So I would love to revisit the Abandon All Artichokes universe. And it's a little scary. I'm like, I don't know what it's like for other designers, but maybe they're like, I know for some people at least, like, oh, I got a million ideas for expansions and stuff, and I can't wait to do these different things with the game. Right now, I'm kind of staring into the abyss. I don't know what that would look like. So it's one of those things where I'm just gonna have to sit with it and say, like, yeah, we'll see what comes out of. And also this year, so much stuff to adjust to and play around with, and really, see what's important in life. And Abandon All Artichokes is one of those things. So I can't wait to see what happens with that.
Okay, well, guess we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, also thanks for letting me know about the title. It's been a while since I streamed, so I had made the title the wrong title, but it's updated now. Thanks Pez, for the heads up there.
So I think one question everybody is just dying to hear the answer to is, what is it about artichokes that disappoints you so deeply?
Oh my gosh. I get this question all the time. People, I didn't know how attached people were to artichokes before I did this. It was just kind of like, artichokes, they're kind of a funny vegetable. Artichokes is kind of a funny word. People get so mad. They're like, I love artichokes. Why do you hate artichokes? What do you have against artichokes?
There's so many great things about artichokes.
Yeah.
They're ranked #1 over all other vegetables when it comes to antioxidant levels, including
Really?
anti-inflammatory antioxidants. It's absolutely true.
Oh, I
It's
didn't know that.
it's an unbloomed flower, part of
Yeah.
the sunflower family. I mean, I'm just full to the brim with artichoke facts, and it's all because of your game.
Wow. Yeah, I need to brush up on my artichoke facts. I was lucky enough to. I've been looking at houses this year, and one house had a garden with an artichoke plant, and I finally saw it in the wild, and they're crazy. It is like a plant with a flower on top of it. It's not like any other vegetable plant that you've ever seen. So, it is a very cool plant. I haven't had artichokes a lot since becoming an adult because they're kind of a pain to cook. You gotta get them and steam them, and you don't get a lot of food for what you get. I mean, that being I do really enjoy artichokes. I have enjoyed them in the past. All that being said, they are kind of more of a butter delivery device. You get a little bit of the plant in there when you're eating the leaves. You dip it in the butter, and it's mostly the butter. Let's be honest, okay? You get some plant in there, but mostly you're just chowing down on butter. The other thing, I've enjoyed artichokes a lot more since becoming an adult because when I was a child, my parents told me that if you ate the inside of the artichoke, you would choke on it, and that's why it was called an artichoke. So whenever I got to the middle, I would always give it to them. And as any artichoke eater knows, that's the best part. My parents totally scammed me with that. Because they're like, those little hairs will stick in your throat and you're going to choke on them. So I would give it to them. And then, of course, they would eat the most delicious part of the artichoke. So after learning that, I was like, oh, yeah, that part is very tasty of the artichoke. But yeah, it was mostly the alliteration. And other interesting thing, when I came up with the idea, I always thought it was kind of an obnoxious title because it's just long, right? It's like Abandon All Artichokes. It doesn't make any sense.
I keep getting my tongue twisted trying to say it.
I know, right? And a lot of people, they'll say AAA, right? Because it's it's a mouthful. So when I pitched it to Game Right, of course I was like, oh, you don't have to keep the title. You can call it whatever you want. I'm not really wedded to the theme or the name or anything. They're like, no, that was one of the reasons that we like it is because the title is so silly. And it makes people laugh. It's funny now when I go to the doctor or whatever, they ask me what my profession is, and I'm saying I'm a board game designer, and everyone's always surprised, and they're like, a board game designer? What is that? What do you even do? And I'm like, oh, I made this game called Abandon All Artichokes, and they just laugh. They're like, what? So it definitely catches people's attention. Then of course, the tin, it's got just that nice thing. It's
right.
The Googleability of it is really great, right? It's #1
definitely.
On Amazon for the keywords Abandon All Artichokes.
Okay.
Right. It says that it's #1 of things called Abandon All Artichokes.
Congratulations.
Yeah,
What an achievement.
yeah. So I have nothing against artichokes. I think it's
Will you
funny
eat one
and
for us right now on stream?
sure. Let me just go run down to the grocery store. I should. Oh no, wait. I do have. Shoot, I gotta get out of frame for a second.
Okay, no worries, no worries.
Hmm.
You have an artichoke. Is that a prop or is that a real artichoke?
Oh, it's a real artichoke. It was just here waiting for me to. I actually have. I should have
Beautiful.
put these next to me so I could hold them. But I got a bunch
Oh,
of
and a potato.
different vegetables and stuff made out of plastic because I don't know, for marketing or something. So I
Okay.
have a bunch of vegetables and they're fun. I can
All
play with
right.
them.
Keep it close.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for telling us so much about your game, Abandon All Artichokes, Emma. What other games have you either made or are in development that you can tell us about?
So I have a couple of other published games. I have Heart Catchers, a two-player game of secrets and deception that got released about 4 years ago. I'm in another game called And Then We Died, a cooperative storytelling game where you play as ghosts trying to figure out how you died so we can all pass on to the other side together. That got released a couple of years ago. And this year, I was lucky enough, in addition to Abandon All Artichokes, to make a small bookmark game called Unravel, which is a little role playing ish style game completely contained on a bookmark. And I got to make
Ooh.
that with Travis D. Hill for one of his RPG zines that he kickstarted. So that was super fun. I'm working on a few other things. One that I'm excited about hasn't been announced yet, but hopefully, sometime within the next year, I'll be able to announce a new project that's being published. I've also
Oh.
been with Heartcatchers and then we died. I worked with small indie publishers, made a small print run of it, and they ended up, for whatever reason, not continuing as publishers. So I actually have the rights to back both of those games back. And then we died in particular, I've been working on a lot of ideas to reinvigorate that. And you can actually, I think I'll post the link at the end of the chat, but I have it up on Tabletop Simulator, an earlier version of And Then We Die, which is word fragments on cards. You can play around with it, tell some stories. I think it's just a really cool tool and something you could potentially build a lot of games off of. So I've been thinking a lot, do I want to pitch this to new publishers? And where I've come down with that is it's easy enough. I just need to figure out an art direction for it because I have the cards, I have the rights back to it. I know mechanically how everything works. I just want to kickstart that, re-release it. I'm playing around with a way to make it into an oracle deck. So,
Mm.
which is something along the lines of tarot, where you can tell personal stories or gain insight into your psyche by making these little stories, playing around with the words. So there's so much potential for that
Wow.
as a game and as a product. So again, things have been a little slower this year than I had
Yes.
hoped, but it's in the back of my mind, and mostly just taking that leap of faith. Right, it's been a long time since I did my own Kickstarter, so it's kind of stealing myself up to like be completely 100% control of a project, but I think I can do it, and I'm taking some baby steps to make
Mm.
that happen.
Excellent. For all the viewers out there, if you have any last minute questions, we're going to start wrapping up pretty soon. But before we go, I wanted to make sure I provide something sort of maybe like a Christmas present or maybe just a congratulations on your award. But I have a special surprise for you, Emma. And
No,
if you wouldn't
what?
mind waiting just like a couple minutes, I'll show you. So feel free to entertain our guests. I'll be right back.
What? Oh my gosh. This is a surprise. I did not know this was going to happen. All right. Javion's going to be back in a second. I'm going to post some links in the chat for ways that you can acquire Abandon All Artichokes. First up, I have purchasing from the Labyrinth Game Store in Washington, D.C. This is a store I haven't been able to go to yet because it's been a while since I've been to D.C. Of course, I'm not really traveling now, but I've made their acquaintance online. It's a super lovely store. They ship all across the country, so definitely recommend people check that out if they want to get copies of the game. If you're in the UK, you can check out Zatu Games. They have copies there as well. I definitely encourage people to go to local game stores, support your local game store as much as possible. If that's not an option for whatever reason, you can also get the game on Amazon, or if you've gotten the game and you'd like to post some comments or reviews, you can go to Amazon or Board Game Geek to do that. I actually read every single comment and review that goes up on those. I really appreciate getting that feedback. Or if you just want to message me on Twitter, talk about the game, or any of my other design work, I really love chatting about those things. So, yeah, just check those out. Oh gosh, I don't.
I'm so excited to show you this.
Oh gosh, I don't know.
So, Emma, if you recall, we used to work together. That's how we met.
Yeah.
Working together at Mox Boarding House or Card Kingdom in Ballard, Washington State. And if you recall, one of our tasks or duties while working at Mox was to review board games.
Uh-huh.
And do you recall having ever done any of those reviews?
Yeah. We would do the staff picks, right? Where we would rate the things.
The staff picks.
Yeah.
So what I have here are all of your staff picks from our time working at Mox Boarding House. I saved all of them.
Oh gosh. Uh-huh.
And I would like to read maybe one or two of them that I really liked.
Aw, yeah, sounds lovely.
So these are Emma's board game reviews.
Oh,
They're very short, and you almost always, give yourself a very silly title.
Oh my gosh, yes!
And those are definitely my favorites.
Oh.
So here's one for a game called Cat Lady, picked by Emma Meow Meow. Fulfill your lifelong dream of collecting cats and becoming a crazy cat lady. The incredibly simple gameplay: grab a row or column of cards, move the cat piece, refill the grid, evolves into surprisingly strategic decision making. Will you lure and feed on an adorable kitty army, or hoard toys and costumes? Only you can decide. And here's another one for The Last Garden, picked by Post-Apocalyptic Emma, which is a very interesting title for what I believe is an actual gardening game.
Well, it's a gardening game, but the gardeners are robots set in a time after humanity ceases to exist. So yeah.
Okay. Well, Post-Apocalyptic Emma says, long after we're gone, robots will attempt to recreate gardens from the remnants of our dreams. Using only bits of scrap metal. This strategic worker placement game benefits from an interesting tempo. Make a risky bet to score big, or watch it all slip away. Unique pieces, including colored gems and various robot meeples, provide an immersive feel. Well done, very nicely worded. And the last one I want to do here is for a game called Villainous.
Oh.
Written by Malemacent.
Based on best villain of all time, Maleficent.
Malemacent says, face it, we all know who the really fun and interesting characters in the Disney movies are. What could be more devilishly entertaining than creating alternate histories in which the bad guys win. Buckle up for a fun and strategic ride as the villains take the wheel in this devious and dastardly card game.
Oh wait, was that laugh part of
Yeah,
it?
you wrote it. Yeah, you wrote down "wahahaha" at the end of it. So
Oh
we
my
should include it.
gosh. This is embarrassing and fun, and I love it. It's great.
I will wrap these nicely, and I'll make sure to get them to you somehow
Oh my.
for Christmas because I loved these enough to make sure I took them home before I left and was laid off.
That's really
So,
cool.
thank you once again, Emma, for inviting me to ask you about all these wonderful games that you have designed and talking us through this journey through publishing a widely, massively, insanely successful deck building, deck wrecking, artichoke destroying
Mm.
card game.
Thank you, Javion. I couldn't have done this without you, and I I've seen you, Gen Con start to do these streams and stuff, and it's just like it's been so amazing to be able to do these streams with you, starting with the Gen Con, the mock streams, the new
Mhm.
hotness games we used to do. I remember, I think the first time you were saying you were nervous or worried about it, but you've just been doing such an amazing job, and I hope to be able to see you on more shows and stuff in the future because you're amazing and you're so smart and
Oh,
talented and absolutely one of my favorite people. So thank you. And thanks
I
to
hope.
everyone who joined the stream too.
Yeah, thank you everybody who joined the stream today. I really appreciated getting to chat with you. Emma, I hope we get to build a board game together, maybe someday in the near future. We've got nothing but time,
Yeah, I know,
so maybe
right?
we'll work on something. We'll see. And I hope that we also get to recreate, not recreate, but reminisce on all the fun development stories that
Yeah,
you've shared with us, like the ones that you shared with us tonight.
yeah. In the future, yeah. And